Good morning, Kai. Thank you for joining us today. The Support Center for Data Sharing invited you today because we are connecting different stakeholders in the ecosystem of data sharing that help others to share data or have interesting and successful models of sharing data. You, Kai Hüener, are the CTO of CDQ. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself today and about CDO, maybe starting with what brought you in the position you are here right now today with us?
Yes, of course. So thank you first of all for the invitation and to talk about the data sharing. CDQ has a background in data management since I would say 15, 16 years. We started as a university research program, doing research around data quality management, data architecture, data governance, and these topics. And this program is still running. It's called the Competence Center CDQ. And out of this, the company CDQ was founded. I'm one of the founding guys in this company, and so in the role of the technical director, the CTO. From the research program, we started with consulting services, again, around data strategies, data governance models, data quality management. And from these projects, we learned that clients have very similar topics, very similar problems, very similar processes, especially around the domain of business partner data. There's customer and vendor data. And this is why we started around 5 to 6 years ago, together with some initial companies like Bayer, like Novartis, like Nestle, to set up the data sharing community, which is still in place and growing, and which has developed to the, let's say, core of our company, of CDQ. And in my role as the CTO, I'm responsible for developing the software of the platform that is used to share the data. And I'm responsible for, let's say, product management, data science, community management. So everything that we do, we run, we develop to enable the data sharing between our, as we call it, members of the data sharing community. So background is research, background is consulting, but core topic is the data sharing we will talk about today. And what is important is that our focus, as I said, is the domain of business partner data. Of course, we also have ideas around material data and other domains, but what we do today and what I can share some experience and some ideas around is the domain of customer and vendor data.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And before we get more into the what your company is doing and customer and vendor data, when you look back, maybe when you were in school or studying, could you imagine that you would move into a direction like this? Was this what you wanted to do, or is that your passion? How did it happen?
Well, so from my studies, I'm really computer scientist, so around data, databases, also artificial intelligence and API design. So that's already 20 years ago when I started these studies. In between, I did some economic studies, a PhD in St. Gallen, which was, of course, from the core topic, not what we do today, but when it comes to, let's say, the business model, not only for our company, but also for the partners, for the members in the data sharing community. So why they do this, what is in for them at the end. This background also from the economic studies helped very much, because at the end, it's a business model, ecosystem, so to say, a data share economy, how we call it, that has to fit into the benefit frameworks, the targets of all the members. And of course, when I look into our technology stack, there are very many topics. I remember, of course, from my computer science studies, especially when it now comes to artificial intelligence. We started there to play around with neuronal networks and stuff like this. And this has, of course, developed further in the last 10, 20 years. But the basics, how such networks are trained, what you need as input, and how the methodology works is still, of course, the same. And so the background is more relevant now since compared to the last, let's say, 10 years for me.
Yeah. So in a way, the technical background can now only be used because other, let's say, framework circumstances were not ready as they are right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And of course, we are not doing I don't know, self-driving cars or complex image recognition things. We're just trying to solve data problems. But also there is much potential for artificial intelligence, especially when it comes to the community, where you get feedback from very many companies, very many users who have similar problems. And this is, from my perspective, very big potential, especially for data sharing, to collect, so to say, the users, or to combine or integrate the users of similar data and collect the feedback to train at the end AIs to solve problems. So that is, maybe come to that later on, but this is one of the biggest potentials I see in this domain of data sharing.
Before we go into the future field, how AI can even improve what we and you are doing right now, let's start at the basics. What are the challenges your clients have that you help solving for them?
Yes, as I said, our focus is on the domain of customer and vendor data. So it's about addresses, about tax numbers, legal names, legal hierarchy. So these are the attributes of the information we are dealing with. At the end, this is more or less public information, so you can Google it, right? Just Google the value-added tax number for European companies. You can get the legal addresses, the legal names from the websites, and so on. However, it's a big challenge for global customers, for global companies, to have up-to-date, complete information for all their customers, all the vendors, right? Companies like Siemens have 2 million vendor and customer records. So this is really much data they have to care about. And when you think about business networks, it's clear that a company is not the customer of only one business partner, but there are many others. So there's an overlap between the companies. And this is the very basic idea of our data sharing approach, that we want to make use of this overlap potential to share the effort of updating, of completing such data I mentioned, addresses, legal names, hierarchy. So it's not about strategically relevant information like purchasing conditions or some secret information. It's really just about these public attributes, these identifying attributes we want to improve.
I understand. So when you say customers and vendors, you're talking B2B, I assume?
Yes, absolutely. So you're going in the direction of data privacy, I would think. So of course, yes, it's only about B2B contacts. It's not about persons. However, there are gray zones, right? If you think about a doctor, if you think about a lawyer, or some single workers, you have to get very clear which attributes you can consider from GDPR perspective. You can consider as registered information, publicly available information, and on the other hand, a phone number, an email address is more private and personal information. But also there, because the issue is again the same for all the companies, also there data sharing can help, right? If you think about this is what we do, for example, train AIs to identify such personal data. You can use again the feedback of many's to train such networks, such neural networks, and this is something where you can also tackle the GDPR issue by community work. But to make it simple, yes, the focus is B2B, customers, vendors, full stop.
So you're kind of answering the difficulty about not having a global, up-to-date company register. Like some countries have a good company register. In some countries, it's open. In some countries, also due to personal data, this is discussed kind of heated, I think, right now. So when the company register will be a high-value data set under the new PSI directive, would that help you or would that threaten your business model in the utopian view that all company registers are open and in good quality?
Yeah, that would help a lot for sure. So when we go deeper, what we do or how we enable the data sharing, the idea that our data sharing members, the companies at the end, the end users, so to say, of the data, that they share the updates, the information, that is only one puzzle piece in this data sharing. Of course, there has to be quality assurance, there have to be data quality rules, there have to be checks of identifiers of VAT numbers and so on. So there is very much external, from our perspective, external information used in our services. And these open data repositories play a very important role in this. For example, if we look to France, the country, I would say, with more or less the best open data situation, because the Siren repository provides very much information, including industry codes, including some hierarchy information. But even for France, you have to get clear how this data is integrated, for example, into a Salesforce system, into an SAP system. So you have to map the information. And also this issue is, again, an issue for many companies. So also on this metadata, on this integration level, you can make use of data sharing. So we apply this data sharing idea to the effective records, right? To get an address, an identifier correct. But we also apply it on this meta level to share data quality rules, to share this integration knowledge, how to map the attributes and so on. And if you think broader than just France, you have then 10, 20, we know 70 on a global scale open data repositories we have to integrate, right? To set up a data model, to link the attributes, and also to integrate services like the European service for checking VAT numbers. We have to integrate these services into the processes, into our service landscapes, so to say.
When you say you set up a data model, how does that look like? Is that an individual data model for each situation, or do you follow an approach there, or a model that you created?
Yes, so we follow a semantic integration approach there. So we have a semantic graph where we have all the source data models. So for the Siren repository, for the German Handelsregister, for the Polish register, and so on. And we model we model the data models of these repositories, and then we map them to a you could call it canonical data model that we have defined. So we have the CDQ domain model for business partner data with addresses, identifiers, and we map the particular fields to this model. And because it's not just on PowerPoint and paper, but really in a semantic graph, we can automate the integration of these sources very well.
And so would it describe well if you say that you're kind of hub or a translator, integrator, a bridge? How would you describe that?
Yes, absolutely. So customers of us, so the members in the data sharing community, often call us a data hub, as you name it, for sure. So we integrate the sources. We also integrate commercial sources like Dun & Bradstreet data, for example. So if you pay for such data, we have access to the APIs, and we can integrate the information as well to the data model. I would say our services that enable the data sharing, and that's also a key enabler, I would say, for the data sharing process, go beyond. So it's not only about the data integration, but it's also about using this integration, for example, to ensure data quality. So if you think about that, you want to bring together data from, as I said, Bayer and Novartis, two active members in the community. They have different standards of address languages, abbreviations, encodings, really different, even within one company, different standards. And you have to harmonize this data within the companies, across the companies, but you cannot implement a common standard in such global companies. But you have to use their situations, map it to our data model, and this way bringing the data together. And for this, the external sources help, but it's only, again, one step in this process.
Understood. So you kind of bring the information you get from external sources. You, in a technical way, understand what a Bayer or a Novartis has, and then you update the gaps and to a certain level harmonize that they have.
Yes, absolutely. And we do
Yeah.
not expect that the companies apply our data model, our standards. They can live in their worlds, but we integrate it, so to say, virtually, and just share back the information we derive from this virtual integrated data, like updates, like corrections, like validation results, and so on.
And then you mentioned learning processes also supported by AI. So what would be the next step? You have these external sources of data. You have the members that you're working with to update their data and improve their data and their data management. And how would then the learning part look like? You can learn from those processes, from those sharing processes.
So there are different potentials for learning algorithms. So let's say in the first level, you can apply, or we do this already, apply such technologies for example, cleaning up an address, right? You can train a model to understand a Chinese address, a Japanese address that is provided not well structured, and you have to structure it to combine it, to compare it between the companies. And this is what you can easily train a model to parse such addresses. Just one example. Another example I already gave regarding this natural person screening. You can train models with known forenames, shown names, legal forms, and company names, and so on, and let then the neural network classify, so to say, records. And that's working quite well, especially when we include some feedback loops from the community, right? And let's say new levels that we're currently working on is also to train models to make decisions on updates of data. You have to think about this business partner domain is not static, right? Companies change their addresses, they change names, their mergers, acquisitions, and these changes have to be approved by companies. You cannot just take over a VAT number because CDQ says, well, that's right. But there are some compliance processes, some documentation needs when you want to change, for example, let's take this example, a VAT number. However, you can add or integrate into this process, for example, external sources who can validate a new VAT number and tell maybe the old one is outdated, the new one is active. And this is a big indicator that the new one is correct, right? For example, you can apply rules to check the formats and so on. And you can go one step further that you, for example, try to understand a complete update. So for example, if there is an update with a typo in a street, the name is only uppercase, and you have a given record, which is very well structured, the address is correct, then maybe the update is not so good. And you can train such a decision model with feedback from users. And if they say in 99% such a structured update is to be rejected, then you can start to auto-reject, and also the other way around, right? And this is what we are currently working on to learn from the manual decision processes how we could automate these updates. This is to make it very clear. This is nothing that can happen. I don't know, if you join the data sharing community and then you can automate by these AIs 100%. This is a process. You have to establish trust in the companies, company by company, and then they start to accept auto-completion rules, as we call it.
And you talk about trust, and this is also related to the question I have. So if a company wants to become a member, what are the obstacles? How do you create this trust?
Yeah. Well, there are several obstacles. So first obstacle, of course, is beside any data sharing, they have to accept that managing business partner data is a challenge, right? They have to understand that there are continuous changes, that they have to cover the entire world, 200 countries with identifiers, legal forms, national address formats, and so on, and that it is better to rely on external services than doing everything on their own, right? This is a first step, so to say. And then they can have the choice, let's say, between commercial data providers or maybe other integrating open data on their own or using approaches like data sharing. But that's the first step. And there are only, let's say, the mature companies who understand this. But it's of course getting better. So that's a question of the maturity of a company regarding data management. When it comes to then the potential of data sharing, so we differentiate two major effects. The first one is the first time right effect. That means if you have access to reliable data from a commercial provider, from an open data source, or from a data sharing pool, then this helps in terms of saves money, brings speed into your processes if you can look up a new vendor, a new customer in a data pool. That's a very simple logic, but it's important to understand. And the second effect is we call it zero maintenance effect. So that means if you would get proactively updates for your business partners before you realize that a VAT number is outdated or an address is wrong by your processes, by process faults, right? Because you ship goods and they don't reach the customer, for example, then this is a big and important effect. And this is where I would say, of course, you also get updates from an open data repository, but then you have to integrate 70 once, right? And maybe in Africa or India, there is no repository. And there, the data sharing community that really shares the updates of the records come into the game, because these updates are identified at a company, they share it, and the other companies benefit from it. And this way, the zero maintenance effect is, from my perspective, the major effect when it comes to data sharing.
And what does a company that wants to become a member has to give in return?
They have to pay a fee, of course. We have costs to develop the platform, to manage the community. So there's a fee for our services at the end. But that's, let's say, the minor part, I would say, when it comes to the mind change they have to manage, the transformation in the data management organization. It has to get clear that others also do a good job, right? The data management guys are mostly, let's say, really, they like their processes. They're very into the details of an address format and so on. But that's the same situation across all companies I know at a certain majority, let's say. And this has to be understood that, in my example, that a Novartis does also a good job for managing addresses in South Korea compared to Bayer. Right? They can, of course, share these efforts, not when it comes to their really business needs in terms of purchasing conditions and very specific attributes, but when it comes to completeness of an address, correctness of a VAT number, and so on. This can be shared, and this has to be understood. But of course, it's a, let's say, change process to understand and accept this.
And how difficult is it for those companies, but maybe also for you, to make sure that this is the case, that the address data is shared, but maybe not some node in a field that has more of a personal, or is about a personal matter or a business matter? So how can you be sure?
Well, we manage this by two things. So first thing is that this effective sharing of records is only, let's say, the third or fourth step in a journey phase we have. So that starts to get access to the data model that I mentioned, to data quality rules, to the data pool, to the data sources on level 2. We have other services around compliance checks and so on. So things that you can just run on your data without thinking about sharing. And if you start to realize that there is benefit, then you want to get more in terms of better coverage of the updates, more warnings regarding compliance issues and so on. And then I think, or then we see that the step towards sharing information is not the big one. So you cannot go to a company like, as I said, Nestle, Novartis, Bayer, and say, we'll share all your customer vendor data tomorrow, and then you have benefits. That's a process over 1 to 3 years, but it works well. The other thing is that the sharing is, of course, anonymous. So Novartis does not know that a certain update comes from buyer. It comes from CDQ, from the community, or for a certain external source. This is transparent, but they do not get the information which company has shared an update. That's one aspect. And the other aspect, no company has to share data, right? They only get community updates for the records they also share. That's a principle in the data sharing community. But they are not forced, for example, to share strategic suppliers. Right? If you start business in a new market for I don't know, very specific chemical products, there might be only one or two suppliers who can serve this, and you want to protect this knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the majority of supplying data for sure. It's only 1% maybe, and you can just skip it from sharing, and that's fine. It's up to you.
And those updates, the community-generated updates, do they work actively towards you, that a partner, the community, provides you with an update, or is it just an update of the data they agreed to share and then it is transmitted automatically to you?
No, the updates come directly from the data maintenance processes of the companies. So we provide APIs, and these APIs are integrated into the tools, into the SAP tool, for example, of the data sharing members. And if they save an update in their process, and it applies to certain rules, like I said, not strategic supplier and so on, then this update is sent to us. As far as they have agreed to share data, right? Yep. There are also scenarios where they just share the updates with us, CDQ, without allowing these updates to go to the community, just to let us check the quality, check for updates in repositories and so on. But to make it simple, the update comes from the process to our services. We do some quality assurance. We also let peers who have the same record validate an update, so it does not reach directly the data pool. But at the end, yes, the update comes actively from the customers to our data pool.
And are there any other companies like you? Do you have competitors? How is the market scene or the dynamics?
Yeah, so let's say from the this general approach of data sharing for business partner data, that is, as far as we know, unique, and that is also confirmed from Gartner analysts that they don't know such an approach on a global scale. So this is really new. For sure, there are data sharing approaches. If you think about, I don't know, Google Maps, for example, that are in place since years, right? Even with very detailed data that is shared on businesses on the Google Maps platform, or if you think about specific industries, you have approaches where pharmaceutical data is shared. So there are, of course, data sharing approaches, but in the way we implement it and we manage also the community with all the aspects I mentioned regarding the metadata, the trust, compliance framework around it, that is, as far we know, unique.
And I have a question around the liability. What happens if an update is wrong? Whose fault is it?
Yeah, it's that's always come, this question also from customers, and my response is always that is at the end some kind of insurance question, right? Of course, we could check for insurance who really covers all indirect business risks that might occur from a data breach or data not breach, but a data quality issue. And but such an insurance would be quite expensive.
Yes.
So we are not liable for sure for the data quality issues. We are just providing, let's say, a reference data pool that can be used in addition to the effective processes. And maybe another comment to this question always comes at the beginning of talks to new prospects, new customers, when they understand how the process works, what they can do with the data, what not, and so on. It's getting very clear, right? You have to think about you just run your processes like before. You just get an update information, not from your procurement department, but from the CDQ data sharing community into your process. And it's not like this data is updated silently in your databases. You have to accept it. Of course, maybe you can accept also automation rules, but that's the future, right? It's not yet the case.
Okay. So if an address is updated, accepted, and a big shipping goes to the address and gets lost because the address is wrong, this stays a liability of the company that shipped to that address, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And what happens if a company decides to step out of the community? They just stop sharing, but what happens with the data you retrieved in that time? Do you have to then, tell me more about that.
Maybe to explain that, we have to go one level deeper into this, how this data sharing approach works. So when a company shares data or joins the data sharing network, the first step is that they start sharing data with us, with CDQ. So that means in our cloud infrastructure, we set up a protected, safe cloud environment, cloud database, how you want to call it, where they can integrate, synchronize, copy the data they want to manage us, synchronize into this database. And then we can start on this data to analyze for data quality issues, for updates and so on. But this has not yet anything to do with the data sharing we are talking about, sharing with peers. If such a customer from our perspective leaves, then we just delete the data and they are gone, right? So this is more, we call it a data quality as a service offering than a data sharing offering, right? Yeah. We just have a cloud, we monitor the data, we inform them about issues, about updates, compliance issues, but anything is shared. And for this situation, it's not an issue. They just go out and the data is deleted. Regarding the data sharing, the process is like this, that a company can disclose the updates they provide to us. So again, the updates are stored in this protected data environment, in this protected cloud database, and they can disclose updates, for example, for certain records, for certain countries, for certain cost groups, or for all of them, all of their updates. And these disclosed updates or the disclosed records, we collect these updates, check for quality and so on, and build the data sharing data pool out of it. But these updates are no longer, so to say, a part of the customer data. It's just what we derive from these updates. The customer, so our customers, the data remain and are completely under their control until this first step. And when they disclose the updates for the community, they cannot say, well, we leave now and we want to somehow get the updates out of the data, but it's impossible, right? Yeah. So part of this data sharing disclosure is to, let's say, really share the updates with the companies, with the other peers.
When we talk more about these like legal component about data sharing, when you set up the current processes and the base and the platform, did you have the feeling that the regulations around data sharing were solid in helping, or were there uncertainties, or maybe even still are uncertainties where you wish for more legal clarity?
So there are, on a high level, there are three areas of compliance that have to be checked. The first one, and that is very specific, is cloud compliance, IT compliance from the company perspective, right? We can skip this. That's individual, and you have to comply to certain standards of the particular companies. The second one is antitrust, right? If you talk about data sharing of such global large companies of a specific industry, you have to check antitrust, and that was checked at the beginning by many lawyers in the starting companies. But the answer then was always very clear, as it is only about public information. that you can also Google, right? Besides integration efforts and so forth, but it's no hidden information. And second, this community is open for all companies, right? We do not say a particular company is not allowed to join. It is acceptable and not relevant for antitrust regulation. That was one outcome, and this was, let's say, the same response in all lawyer talks we had. So that's, from my perspective, I'm no lawyer, but that's a very, very, very clear statement. When it comes to data privacy, then it's getting more difficult in these, let's say, gray zones, right? When it comes to doctors, when it comes to lawyers, and so on. And of course, if you reach a gray zone and if you are a global company, you say, okay, we don't want to share such data. It's not, we take it out, and we only share B2B records that we're really, really sure about. And that's, let's say, the fundament of the data sharing. Of course, there is a potential also to share, let's say, the professional addresses and legal forms of a lawyer company or a doctoral practice or a hospital institute and things like that. And regarding such data, the statements of the data privacy officers in the companies was that if such data, for example, a doctor is registered in a national register that is publicly available, not with the names of their children and not with their private email address, but with their legal address and maybe the name of a practice, then even if the name is part of the practice name, Dr. Donald Duck or something like this, then it is okay to share also this information, but not phone numbers, not email addresses, and so on. So there we have to be very specific. And again, no company has to share such data. It's very different how the members manage it, and it's at the end the decision of the particular data privacy officers. If you would ask them, because you asked if the regulation helps, I would say it would much help if it's more clear around this, right? I very much like GDPR. It's a very, very big asset from my perspective for Europe to have this in place, very strict, very good, very well regulated. But the idea of GDPR is, of course, not to stop, for example, sharing of doctor addresses. Definitely not. The reason is a different one. And this could be, well, made clearer, I think, to make clear where these rules have to be applied very strictly. But in other areas, it can be accepted that, in my example, that the legal address of a doctor or a lawyer or I don't know, how you say Handwerker in English is shared.
Yeah, I understand. And you have the address data, the vendor data, but there's more intelligence that you are collecting or could be collecting. You could have intelligence about which companies employ or work with which vendors. So you could even have some kind of suggestions like other companies use that vendor, or you can have intelligence about how often are vendors changing their address. You could even maybe have intelligence about the quality and reliability of vendors. Do you collect these intelligence, or do you have plans to do something with that?
Yes or no. So we have to be very, very careful in these areas regarding what I mentioned, antitrust. So and also it's not a data privacy issue, but you as a company also for B2B data are somehow reliable, for example, to not blame a supplier to others that they are insolvent or not paying on time or things like that, right? So you are not allowed to share, let's say, beliefs, but you can, but you are allowed to share facts, right? If you have an external reference, that's fine. And this is where we have to be very careful. So, for example, you know, there are services like financial stability ratings. Is a company next to insolvency or not? Let's say. And in some cases, such data is derived from payment behavior and so on. And that's again a gray zone from my perspective. You can, of course, use this transactional data to derive such findings, but you have to be very clear to also state it in that way, that you have calculated a metric that is based on facts, the behavior, the payment behavior, but you cannot collect, let's say, a 1, 2, 3, 4 rating regarding a certain supplier.
Yep.
Right. And if to make it positive, if we define these metrics transparently, and if it's really clear on which transactional data, which scores are calculated, then I'm completely with you that there is high potential also for such kind of ratings. But transparency and fact-based calculations is really important in this case.
What are the next steps for CDQ? Did you reach your goal? Will there be more, as you say, AI to automate things? Where is CDQ standing in 5 or 10 years if everything goes according to plan?
Yeah, so we have to grow. That's for sure, right? The data sharing approach is capable of serving, I would say, each company with a certain number of business partners. You do not need it if you have 100 customers in two countries, but if you have some global coverage or let's say 20, 25 countries, 10,000 customers, then you could really get benefits out of it. And this is what we have to achieve. Grow the data sharing community, and plans are going this industry-wise, right? We have already some very famous players in the pharmaceutical industry, in the automotive industry, and this is what we want to continue to increase, let's say, the overlap between the companies. The technical objectives regarding AI and so on, this is more, let's say, our internal processes, how we want to leverage the technology and so on. But the very simple but critical goal is to grow, to increase the overlap, the benefits for companies, because, and that's maybe a risk for us, the data sharing approach is clear, right? It's not our invention. And I would say that it will definitely be there in 10 years, right? And the question is just who organized it. Is it somehow organized by the companies themselves, what we try? Or is it organized by a big player, by Amazon or someone who is, then also bringing risk again into this game.
Yeah. So the companies could, in a perfect world, run this community on their own with some element of verification in there, and that would be preferable over having a monopoly over this data.
Absolutely, exactly, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's not there's no chance to do it completely independently, right? You need someone who is, like I said, who's managing the integration, who's organizing the community, and this is how we see our role. But the companies, the owners, so to say, of the data should play, from my perspective, a very important role to ensure data sovereignty and so on, compared to monopoly approach, as you said.
Thank you very much. Probably in the next hours and days, I come up with a lot of more questions when I digest all the information. Is there something we haven't covered yet where you say this is a vital aspect?
No, I think we covered the benefit question, compliance, regulatory things. That's I think interesting for companies who are interested in this approach. We talked about technology, and yes, as I said already, I think it's the next step in data management to use such kind of data sharing approaches also for other domains. But I think for example, material product data, it's much more complex because these domains are more complex. There are already product data pools, but still low material data quality in the SAP system. So there's a big gap. And we have started also to think about concepts there, but it's much more complex. But in the business partner domain, there's really a chance for each company to make something out of it. They have many of them have good data, but they see there's much effort to keep this quality or maybe even to increase it. And this is how data sharing could be used from my perspective, therefore, for very many companies.
Yeah, with shared efforts towards data quality.
Exactly.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much for explaining your thoughts behind it and the processes. I think it's very valuable for the data sharing community. Indeed, as you say, maybe even a role model for data sharing in other domains that are even more complex, but can learn a lot from that model. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. It was fun. Thank you.
Thank you.